They turned it on. One more time. 4 p.m., August 6th, 2020. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Village of Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board. It is a regular meeting. We do have a quorum. However, there's no official business or applications to be considered, but we do have some housekeeping issues to discuss and go over with regard to general business of the board. We also have the minutes of the July 9th, 2020 regular meeting to review and approve. Everyone should have received their packages, either hard copy or email. Would anyone care to make a motion with respect to the minutes of the regular July 9th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Board meeting?
I read through them, but I haven't studied them like I normally do, so I don't feel comfortable. There were some questions.
You have questions?
Are they going to be annexed? Because I was under the impression that they weren't, but there was something in here about, or is it just the road that was going to be annexed?
So it hadn't been widely discussed before the meeting last month. However, it had been articulated to the applicants that if the intent was for the roadway for that subdivision to be public and be turned over to the village, then the village would not be interested in that unless the property would be in the village's corporate limits. So since that discussion, the intent of the applicant and developer is to petition for voluntary annexation pending action on the preliminary plat.
So that was kind of stated in here more
Yes.
clearly than during our meeting?
Second page, around the middle of the page, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth paragraph, if you will, Mr. Campbell stated that there were no restrictions or conditions on the permanent easement agreement with Pinehurst LLC. He stated the intention is for Floyd Way to become a public road through annexation into the Village of Pinehurst corporate limits. Still looking for a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the minutes.
Those that
further.
were here were Cindy, Joel, and myself.
Motion to
David.
approve the minutes. Yeah, I was making a motion to approve the minutes from the,
David Elzamora makes a motion to approve the July 9th, 2020 minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Cindy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. Next item would be general business, and it's update on future planning and zoning board items that Mr. Cameron is just itching to get us involved in.
Thank you. I hope I lead up to that. So we know we don't have any applications before us. What we'd like to have the opportunity to do as staff is, especially when there's no action needed by the board with any application before you, we'd like to first give an opportunity to update the board on what we might be sinking our teeth into next. And I am proud to bring this staff memo before you guys that was included in your packet to kind of update you guys on where staff currently is in regard to a couple of items that we have all looked at, we're familiar with, and really are ready to hopefully move forward with some sort of action or present something to the full board. So as Chair Sanawaso indicated, there's no action going to be taken tonight. What staff's really looking forward to is, again, bring these couple items back into the limelight, and we've got a couple new members since then to kind of really invoke some discussion and get some feedback, kind of bounce some ideas off you guys, as well as let you know kind of what direction staff is heading at this time. So one of the items that you guys are familiar with is potential changes regarding landscaping and tree preservation. So we have been working diligently as staff. We've been using some on-call staff services to really present some sort of comprehensive landscaping overhaul of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. That has become more of an undertaking than we probably imagined it would, and then other things have kind of came in and caused a hiccup in that. So just to update you on where the next directive where staff thinks we should go is really look at, again, to kind of get a small victory, some low-hanging fruit here, is to look at beefing up the standards that we currently have in place, and then maybe tackle the comprehensive update and change a little bit later down the road. So let's just do something to gain some traction and then step in. And we've been having conversations with Leo with this and working toward putting some agenda items together for this month. This was one that Leo's taken a very special invested interest in. So that's why it's here and another reason why it's up front. So what we've been looking at various other jurisdictions and how they regulate tree preservation and landscaping, especially as it relates to development of new single-family parcels as well. So what we really looked at is we want to define a quote-unquote protected area. So what area do we feel like should be the area that should be preserved with landscaping or the existing preservation of landscaping on the site? So we looked at basically the building envelope. So areas that are within the setback areas based on the base zoning. So this diagram here kind of gives you an idea of what we're kind of looking at as a protected area. So some potential language we're looking at is protecting XYZ amount of mature trees of at least 3 inches diameter breast height for a combined diameter breast height in the protected area. And then if you can't meet that for whatever reason based on the actual development itself with the grading, clearing that needs to be associated with it, then you can, as currently is in the PDO now, you can meet that requirement by putting in new installation of new trees. So here's a table where it shows the different zoning districts, the minimum lot size per that district, and what our current PDO requirement is for the new installation of trees if you're not meeting some sort of preservation standard, which we currently don't have. And then the table to the next section there, the table is some numbers that staff have kind of looked at and drafted as a potential change. So if you see for the R5 and the R8 and the R10 zoning district, these are more high-dense residential development districts. Minimum lot size varies from 5 to 8 to 10,000 square feet. The current requirement is that you have at least 4 qualifying trees on your property at time of CO. We are looking at going to 6, 8, and 10 respectively for the R5, R8, R10. And again, the same size tree that either be retained or proposed to be planted is the same. That's a pretty standard, basically diameter there because it will ensure longevity of the tree itself, the species. You'll see the R15, the R20, and the R30, again, more of a medium density development there. The current requirement is 8 trees to be retained or planted on the site. And current draft, we were looking at the numbers of 12, 14, and 16. And then, of course, the R210, which is the minimum 5-acre lot size, mainly within the village's ETJ. The current PDO requirement is 16. We're considering a significant bump up to that to 40, as what we've heard through the comp plan process is, sort of preserving that as a rural state. And the intent, again, with this protected area is to, get this mouse to work, is to really kind of enhance the view shed, the street view there of the property. So as you go, you have a street, a tree-lined street view, especially as new development, new subdivisions, et cetera, come into play. So it will kind of continue what we've enjoyed for years as sort of the built-upon area here in the village. Because within our corporate limits, just about, a good chunk of all those lots have been previously platted in the 70s, the 80s on. So we've already kind of been dealt that hand, and we're trying to work with the infill there. As we look to the potential for development in our ETJ, then we can potentially try to mimic the character that we have now into there, which is, again, this is a lot of what this board has heard in public hearings, what the village council's heard in public hearings, and again, we just went through the comprehensive plan update, so that is an item of significant interest to folks of the public, and while we've been working really hard on that. So that's just kind of a general idea of where we are. Again, we are kind of working on a bit of a comprehensive update, so it wasn't just a focus on the single-family development, but at least in order to kind of gain some traction and move forward, these are some approaches that staff is looking at taking pretty soon, and we would like to welcome any talk or feedback amongst the board as far as the tree preservation and landscaping.
Just for clarity, so the number of qualifying trees that would be needed on the site inside the protected area, that's for the total protected area. So they all could be on one side, right? They could all be on the back side, the front side, one side, and then that would qualify?
And this is, again, where this brief memo kind of leaves you guys lacking. So what we're looking at is we have, and Leo, back me up on this, I think this number's right, at looking at requiring at least half, 50% of those qualifying trees to be placed within the front zone or front protected area. Is that your recollection, Leo?
Yep.
All right. So we try to incentivize the preservation of a certain number of diameter breast height. I believe it was like a total combined of 120
Yeah.
feet, I believe was
Inches.
inches diameter breast height on the total site in that protected area. And if you can't meet that, then here's what you can do to meet that, and then try to require that at least half of them be in that front area. The preservation, if you can meet the preservation, the keeping of the mature specimen trees on site to where a total combined diameter breast height is 120 inches, then you've met that. However, if you can't meet that, then you're referred to this table and how you can then come into compliance and where those newly planted trees should be placed on the site.
Some of our conversation has also been around construction entrances into the construction site. Is there any opportunity or conversation on that subject?
So we felt like this is where we can, and giving an area, it's up to the developer, it's up to the builder, the person submitting. You know, they'll design it, they'll understand what they can work around, and they'll present a landscape plan up front. So again, the protected area that we're trying to enforce or would like to protect there is the setback area. So typically where there's not going to be a building, obviously there's going to be associated drives, entrances, walkways, accessory structures in the side and rear. So as long as that overall number is met, then that's fine. So that gives them a little bit of creativity in how and where they want to place and move those associated features. And a lot of talking and a lot of discussions that we've been having in staff and with Leo is, you know, we do need to try to have a relief valve somewhere just in case something can't happen. So in making that or asking or requiring that 50% be placed along the front, then we can give the village planner some sort of option, you know, then where else can they be planted? And you don't want to further impact requiring someone to play something where it's going to be problematic 10 years down the line, where 10 years down the line, you know, we just had a significant weather event this week, you know, where, you know, there's a potential issue that could arise with the property owner. So we're still kind of working on alternative spacing. There's language in the current PDO that says, like for planted buffers, that the village planner can allow for alternate types and plantings if the end result is equal to or achieves better performance than the required. So, I mean, a reasonable person could think that if you're putting a required size planting and it's just outside of the front or side protected area, that if it's 25 feet off or if it's 30 feet off from the line, you're meeting that intent. So there's got to be a relief valve in how we can text. So we haven't crafted that just perfectly. But there needs, to your point, there needs to be a way for them to have creativity to be able to move and adjust as needed.
In order to try and, let's say, protect and preserve existing trees that would stay along the frontage, I would like to have a condition that once the construction entrance is chosen, that becomes the actual location of the driveway, so that they're not slashing and burning and cutting additional openings, but to give it some thought right up front as to where the driveway would be, and then put the construction entrance there and turn that into the permanent driveway area.
Well, the only reason I'm bringing it up is kind of towards that nature. To that point, I think you could have a builder or a developer, whoever it is, be really on board with this and really be working towards meeting these goals, and then here comes a big dump truck or pull across the yard, and all of a sudden, you don't even know it, but they killed a big tree sitting in the front. So, I think that's the only reason I'm bringing up construction entrances, and they don't even know they've killed the tree. I mean, they've just driven over it hard enough to hit the roots, and over the time of the construction process, that tree leaves.
Yeah, and again, with this giving you guys a snippet of kind of where we are, we've talked a little bit about protection area. Is that right, Leo? If I remember seeing, it's been a while since we've really delved into it. So with the required landscape plan, they're required to show us, how those specimen trees that they are saying that they're going to preserve on site, how they're going to be protected during the construction. But now to your point, things are going to happen. There's going to be changes that are going to happen on the fly. There's going to be a revision, maybe something's going to be adjusted. Sometimes building footprints change, right? We've had that. We've had them where at foundation or at final survey that they're encroaching into the setbacks. So there needs to be a relief valve for some sort of administrative modification, if at all possible. And, we can't find every little nook and cranny that something may fall, but, we understand that, and the ongoing continued compliance with such a standard does obviously present its own issues, and we're still trying to really see if we can work through that. But if we can tie it to a development approval before us that we're acting on at that time, most cases, it's going to work out. Can you turn your mic on, Sonia, please? Hit the front.
Okay, sorry. So are you saying that if the developer comes in and says, okay, we want to put the driveway right here, there's 2 big magnolia trees, but we're going to put it right where the magnolia trees is, that's okay, and we're just going to replace it with these?
If they cannot meet that overall diameter of breast height as a cumulative across the property, I mean, the trees are going to have to come down. There's no doubt about that. But it would incentivize them to design around those. But if they do have to come down, then yes, there's what you got to come back and meet.
Okay, I'm confused. What is the incentivize here?
They don't have to plant new trees.
Okay, but they probably can plant those new trees pretty cheap versus leaving those big trees and working around them.
It's not very cheap to take down trees. There's a cost associated with removing a very large tree.
Not when you're doing construction, but I'm not quite sure I'm following this the way I want to follow it.
Well, I think to Alex's point, so when you first come in and you clear the lot, it's not expensive. But if you were to try to make a plan and leave, you really leave some well-designed trees on the lot, and then something happens and you got to pay somebody to come cut them down, then they're expensive. So,
Okay, but I'm still not satisfied with this, or maybe I'm just not understanding it. I think this kind of opens the door to them saying, okay, well, we can take these trees down because we're going to put the driveway right here. And they said it's okay as long as we plant these trees. Where is there something that actually says they must try to preserve trees?
Again, if there's a certain number that they have to retain, or you have to have it there at the end of it. So one way or the other, whether it be new or preserved, we can't just straight prohibit the removal of specimen trees just, I mean, so they've got to have a right to go in there and develop a property, but all we can do is try to buffer that a little bit. I don't think you can't render.
Trying to make people stop and think before they do whatever they need to do in order to preserve not only what would be in the preservation zone, but to preserve specimen trees within the building setback. And it's going to take, it's a lot of individual cases are going to require some stopping and thinking about where you want to put things. And then if they can't save the specimen trees, then they have to follow the guidelines that would be in the PDO to provide the necessary number of inches and number of trees on a site. Rather than go in willy-nilly, whack everything within the setbacks.
Okay.
And
Don't know.
And it's going to take some education on the part of developers and working with them and the village staff to make it work where it's reasonable and makes sense.
And who's going to do that development before they come in and do all this and decide?
But they're
I mean,
gonna
if
have
they-
to-
If they're going to come in with a plan, okay, I'm just being the devil's advocate here, because people are upset about the trees being cut. They come in and say, okay, well, this is the only way we can do this, and of course, builders do try to do the cheapest way. Let's be honest. Are we helping the builders, or are we helping the village? And that's my question.
I don't think there's anything that's going to keep them from clearing the lot if they want to. But according to this, then they have got to plant trees back in there. And they might not be the specimen trees, but they would be 3-inch trees. And there is, a hope that it'll maintain the same character of Pinehurst, is my understanding.
That's correct. And really, the ideal scenario was probably somewhere in between a preservation and newly plantings, if you really want to get down to it. If you just keep preserving these older trees, they're going to expire at a point. So if you've got new, you're keeping that continuity of going 30, 60 years down the line. So really, you got to think too holistically here, not just the now and 5 years from now, but what could be happening 30 and 60 years from there. And there's no way we can put something that's going to prevent the placement of a building, associated drives, accesses, utilities. Folks need to have that ability if they're going to occupy and live. But we can try to find that common ground somewhere. I mean, Jeremy said, this could benefit both. And that's where we are. This is again why we're here, why staff is bringing this to you, is to get some idea. Something objectively, get something in front of you. You can see what the minimum lot size is for these districts. You can see what the current requirement is whenever we go and do our zoning inspection. You can see the numbers we're looking at. If there's something the board would like to ask us to look further into, or there's another objective standard or a modification to what we propose to you, please throw that to us.
I just have a question of, so what if you're a homeowner that doesn't like trees? And you just want to have, just a grassy lawn without trees? Now, personally, I love the trees, I'm all for it, but I know my neighbor came in and cut down a bunch of trees because he didn't want to deal with the mess of pine trees. And, kind of broke my heart, but what are you going to do?
So that kind of,
There'll be an application and a permit process associated with a building permit.
we have to tie it to a development.
Okay.
That's our authority. We have to tie it to a development that's before us.
Okay, so it has to be new construction.
If someone is coming before the village
Uh-huh.
for a development approval,
Okay, then you can enforce
Correct.
this. Okay,
Yeah, for clarity, Alex, if I'm wrong, but you can't tell somebody who just bought a house and they want to take the trees down. They own the trees. They can take the trees down.
correct?
What'd you just say?
Maybe I'll say, it. Okay. So if someone buys a house and they don't want any trees on the lot, at some point, they own the property. You can't tell them they can't take the trees down. So it's a new construction situation. I'm overstepping what I'm saying, but, so they're tying it to the permitting process of a new construction plan design.
Well, I know that even in the old town, someone cut down a lot of trees because they were afraid of trees and really ruined the property. And I think, especially in Old Town, people are very concerned about that.
Well, one thing, our limits of authority are a little different within the historic preservation overlay, because we have full statutory authority, all municipalities do, that if you have a historic district, then you can regulate the removal of such. And our current standards are, if it's a street-facing tree, and it's at least, I believe it's 12 inches diameter breast height, then you've got to go before the Historic Preservation Commission in the quasi-judicial procedure, and in that public hearing, much like they do with the Board of Adjustment, say that you meet the standards that I'm preserving the historic landscape of this property by removing this tree. So we have a little bit more teeth, a little more levity in how we control it within the historic preservation overlay. The intent for these landscaping standards are for new proposals that are coming before. This is where we have had people for these public hearings, these rezonings, major subdivisions that come before us and say, I just don't want to see the whole place denuded of all this beautiful landscaping, or for the continued view shed of it for generations to come.
so if you're a person building a new house, a brand-new house under development, and you don't want trees, do you still have to pay for the trees?
I don't think I followed the end of that, I'm sorry.
You're saying it's just for new development, correct? Okay, so I'm a homeowner, I've bought a piece of property, and I want to build a home on it, and I don't want any trees on it. So I apply for a permit. Can I have what I want?
You meet the standards.
See, that's why I'm confused.
If you have to come to the village to get development approval,
Right.
whether it be for a new single family, whether it be for a office building,
Uh-huh.
Any other thing that our development ordinance requires that you get approval for, where the landscaping standard is triggered, then you would have to meet that standard.
Then if I don't want any trees, I go to Southern Pines or Aberdeen, right?
Whispering Pines?
Which is fine.
How does this compare or look to other municipalities that have something similar? Is it on par, a little beefed up, a little under? What's your? or
We
Leo's
pulled,
impression?
we pulled from a lot, and we looked around at a lot. I know Darren was keen on Chapel Hills, the landscaping and preservation standard. I mean, I think all of us, I know David probably more than the rest of us, very familiar with what Chapel Hill looks like. It is beautiful. Now, they have a little bit more authority to how they can regulate. But a lot of them look at a percentage of the canopy. So what canopy do you have, and how you have to preserve at least a percentage of that canopy. That's really good. It's either a number like we kind of got here, a numerical value, or as a percentage of the canopy. This is an approach that we've kind of already had in place and does seem to be the easiest for staff. We need to put something in place that staff can easily take and look at with required material to be submitted and say, okay, check, they meet it. But certainly, we could look further into, preserving a percentage of a canopy. But Wake County,
There were
Cary.
several of, not all of our peer communities, but several of them, like Davison, Chapel Hill, looked at Hilton Head, Savannah, Georgia. There may be a dozen different ordinances and preservation plans that were researched. So we have a lot of data and information, and, trying to cull all that into making it fit in Pinehurst is quite a job.
I think to your point earlier, it's a great first step, right? Okay.
And that's exactly where we are now, because again, we're getting into a conversation of, as a whole, something, again, a comprehensive view. Right now, staff's looking at, hey, we've been working on this, we've been hearing it come up time and time. I mean, last month, it came up quite a bit. Just to get some traction, let's get something together, get you guys something that you can really chew on and start that process.
I like that you're doing it in the setback, because they can't build in the setback anyway, so why not preserve that, along with in the character of the village?
And thank you. And the intent for that is to, for screening and buffering, and to also have that sort of tree-lined street view. I mean, Sonia's, mentioned Old Town in the historic district. I mean, that's where a lot, that's the draw to Pinehurst, a lot of that, right? And we have some other beautiful existing neighborhoods, but that's where you have those tree-lined streets and the really, mature landscaping that's there on site. So that's, and most of them are there in the front, they're there in the sides. So that's what the intent for that protected area, but that also gives staff an ability to look at where they need to be placed or where they need to be preserved. So we've got our box that we can stay in, so we're not saying, oh, you need to protect this tree, not that tree. It's this area.
I think it also guarantees, or somewhat leads or guarantees, to the very minimum, at least 3 trees in the front part of the protected area, and most often 5 or more from the 50% rule.
Again,
Don't have, right?
yes, correct. You're right, we don't have. So that would be the incentivized to put it in the main area that we feel that most people would want to see it, without impacting property owners from utilizing side, rear yard. I mean, there's the front setback, currently, nothing can encroach in that front setback unless it's a step or an eave or overhang. Nothing else can encroach in the front setback. Side and rear, you can have like some mechanical equipment, and you can have decks, say, associated with it, can encroach up to 5 feet. So the front that's the focal point. We in real estate, you talk about curb appeal. That's it, right? That's the front. So that's where we're trying to lean in ourselves to.
Well, we got more work to do, but hopefully to finalize issues in the next couple of months, to be able to put something together that we really can chew on and maybe come to an agreement as to something we can present to council for their review and approval.
Yeah, and we obviously are missing quite a few folks here. We hope things start trending where things are much safer and we can really, really get together. But like, especially for Joel and Julia, I've spoken with them. They've kind of got some excused absences. As you guys think about this, how to get in touch with Darren or I. If you start thinking on it, this is just to show you this is the progress. This is where we're thinking about heading this direction. If you have ideas, you want to see some more, reach out to us, think on it a little bit, and let's kind of keep it moving so we don't want to bring something to you guys cold. That was the intent of this. We don't want to bring something to the bigger group. Hey, by the way, this is what we've been working on, just to prove that we're still doing something.
Can you explain how you came up with the number of trees for the different zoning districts?
Well, again, if
You
you,
ever
if
hear about throwing it against the wall?
glad Leo said that. Look at it really, though, you look at the lot size, you know, it wouldn't, it couldn't be justifiable to make a 5,000 square foot lot preserve or have, 60 trees on the site. So we started that as a basis. In addition to, we've already have some language in the PDO that you see. So you start looking at what's our bread and butter. It's mainly the R10 district, right? So that's a big one. And a lot of what we've heard is 4 trees is not enough for a quarter acre lot. 4 trees is not enough.
Especially if you want to really enhance the frontage.
So
So trying to make a bigger, I'll call it a mass along the frontage, the numbers had to increase. And we're just, I don't say we're trying to make an arithmetic progression or even a geometric progression, but trying to fit the number of trees into the space that's created by the zones of protection that we want to get, with the majority in, well, half of it in the front yards. The numbers make sense.
And we also looked at too, not to, I mean, Leo, it was a good pun he had there, but, we looked at number of like linear feet of the front. So what's a typical R10 lot size? What's the typical width we have? Because, we have a good basis because, again, largely Pinehurst itself has been platted for years. So, a lot of them are pretty well similar geometrically, right? So we do have a numerical number we can go by. Well, what about like per 20, 30, 40 linear feet? So what number would that arise at if we want to keep at least half of them in the front? So there was some math involved in coming up with these numbers.
I remember when we were working on this before, having the discussion of when we went for approval, to have diagrams, visuals like you have here that would say, okay, this is a 5,000 square foot lot, and this is what 6 trees on that would look like, or what it would, how much space it takes up, and if they're 3-inch trees, or you meet your 120 or whatever, just for people that aren't real visual, so they can kind of see the difference between 5 acres and 40 trees and 5,000 square feet and 6 trees. And
That's excellent feedback, and that's what we were looking for. So it's something that staff, we can work on as we start moving this through. So you have a visual instead of just something slapped in front. So great idea.
Okay,
People like graphics.
golf course setbacks?
All right, so not to move on too quickly, but as you can tell from the staff memo, I've put a little bit more effort into preparing this one as another item that we've had to deal with quite often lately are golf course setbacks. Most of you guys know, as being members of the Board of Adjustment or have been witnessed into Board of Adjustment meetings, we have been seeing a lot of cases of variances for varying the golf course setback. And if you look at the table that Kelly helped greatly with, look at the number of cases we've had since 2018. I believe the total number from 2018 to present, including the very last one, we've had a total of 16 variance cases, 8 of which have been relative to golf course setbacks. So this is throwing a red flag, has for a while. It has internally with staff before any of these cases or an application even gets made and the fee paid to go before this board. We're working with them. And we don't feel like we have the tools in the development ordinance to make a determination to kind of help this through. So we have support. We know we have the support from the board. We have the support from staff. We have the support from administration. Let's move forward to find a way to really fix this. And I've had numerous ideas here and there on how to fix it or to potentially look at it. So again, this is another opportunity to say, hey guys, we want to fix this because it has become part of our, as Julia stated, our bread and butter. So we need to find a legislative fix. Also included in this memo is a table of what that golf course setback is versus, well, it doesn't have that, but what the accessory structure setback and the principal structure setback is for the golf course in those applicable zoning districts. So 30 is a big number you see, it shows up a lot. And just so you have an idea, that's usually the average front setback. The rear setback for, again, the R10 district's 25 feet. A lot of these cases we've had, there's been an applicable 2 golf course setbacks. So by the time you have now 3 30-foot setbacks, it does severely impact the ability to have a building envelope that's in character with the existing area. So one way that we're kind of looking at maybe tackling this is to have a specific definition in the development ordinance for golf course setbacks. And this, if we can craft that language appropriately, staff may be able to look at an application before us, look at aerial photographs, look at the layout, and determine if this is actually a golf course, therefore a golf course setback should apply, or it shouldn't. And our current definitions, you'll see pulled from the PDO in the memo. So basically the building setback. That's the minimum distance from the property line to the furthest projection of the, let's just call it the structure or building. The exterior wall, it gives us some examples there. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some allowed encroachments like eaves and overhangs, steps, HVAC or mechanical equipment, as they kind of need to be associated a little bit further, or they project a little further from the footprint itself. So it basically just says this is how far off from the property line you have to be to place said structure or building. We define golf course as pretty well as you expect it. A course with at least 9 holes. It has accessories, driving ranges, clubhouse, office, restaurant, concession stand, picnic tables, pro shop, maintenance building, restroom facility, or other similar accessory use or structure. It excludes mini golf. So that pretty well covers the entirety of the chunk of the property that the golf course is on, which we know we have a good mass of that area in our jurisdiction. The village's historic district has, in this current version now, as it's updated, as well as previous versions, had a definition of field of play. So the field of play, as it's defined and as the tool within historic district guidelines, is basically to give an exemption that you don't have to come before the Historic Preservation Commission or get a COA issued if you're doing some of this type of work within what they determine as the field of play, which isn't really for structures, but we feel like there may be a good basis that we could build on from that definition. And so the field of play is determined as area within the applicable recreation development district zoning where golf activity occurs. So golf activity. Now, that's still very open and very subjective. So we're not suggesting let's throw that definition in the PDO, but I think, again, that's something we can build on. And I have a couple of other maps I would like to share with you guys to kind of get the discussion rolling. So this was put together pretty quickly by myself, so I wouldn't let Daniel put his name on this. Daniel's going to help me create some better maps. Darren's approach was, let's map these areas. How many of these potential, we'll call them problem areas, could there still be out there in the village? So this map is to show you the green, obviously, for golf. It's got the labels of what the golf courses are within our jurisdiction. The purple is supposed to be vacant properties that abut golf course area. We hear a lot that there's not many vacant parcels left in Pinehurst, so I was totally surprised that there could potentially be this many more. And I apologize, just the way the map was labeled, it's a little hard to tell. You can see Pinewild to the west there, which is largely R30, so it's a little bit less dense of a development, so the property lines and the shading can show up a little bit easier. There's several in there. Number 6 is where we'll focus on here just a little bit with some I have. So it's so dense, and the labeling here is a little difficult to tell exactly just to the extent there, but you can still see quite a few show up. CCNC, there's a few there. It's probably not going to be a big problem there, and it hasn't been. We've had some around number 1 and number 3. So just in a quick count, and this is very approximate because in order to fact check some of each and every one of these parcels would take a little bit. The total number of purple shaded parcels that you see there adds up to 225. So even if we cull a great bit of that, because there's some large properties there, that's probably going to be, if any development comes before us, it's going to be for a larger subdivision. So it's going to be carving out the large lot into something else. We could be looking at potentially more than 6 or 8 more over the next
That's
2 years.
almost 20 years worth of variances. 12 a year?
And I like you guys, and I know there's term limits here, but I'm not going to be here for 20 years worried about golf course setbacks. So let me show you guys something else to kind of put this in perspective and sort of the problem areas, and maybe we can have some discussions on how you guys think we can tackle this. I prepared a couple of quick maps of some examples. There we go. So here's an area, property that we actually heard a variance for. I believe this was in 2018. So this is on Peachtree Lane. This is at number 6. So you see the subject property is highlighted in the teal color, kind of a little label there, where you can see where it does, that rear lot line does abut golf course. I mean, there's a, I believe that's a, Leo, help me out, there's a green that
Yeah,
it
it was-
abuts. Okay, so you see the cart path showing up, and then there to the,
5.
that's 5?
Fifth hole on number 6.
Okay, thank you, I knew you could help with that. So you see the southern boundary line, is it not within the field of play? And again, I'm using that in quotations because I'm not necessarily saying we take that, but there's not, no one's teeing off there, there's not a fairway, there's not rough there, there's out of bounds markers are far and away from there. There is a comfort station that's nearby. I believe it's just right here. So a 30-foot setback, 30-foot setback, 30-foot setback on a quarter-acre lot, that severely impacted that building envelope. So the property owner and applicant came before the Board of Adjustment and requested a variance, and they were ultimately approved. So this is an example. If we can find a way to say, okay, well, even though this is part of the golf course property, even though this gains you access to play golf and you're going to be in that activity area, is the intent really to have a more impactful setback right here? Because the intent is to preserve the view shed of the golf course, is to protect the homeowner from folks who have errant shots like Darren says he has. I mean, that's usually the Monday morning conversations, how bad Darren did over the weekend. So we kind of get that intent there. So that's what we're kind of looking at as a way to try to better define where a golf course setback should apply. I don't know what happened here. But here's another one I tried to get you guys to see. And you're familiar with the Rockland Lane variances, that they're pretty fresh. This is a property that's not even come before us for anything yet. This is I think this is a vacant property, I'm not sure. But you see this area here, it's wooded. Here's the golf course, here's the fairway right here. And there may be a structure there. I don't know why this had showed up hollow through to this bar. I mean, anyone can make a reasonable determination that this is the golf course. This area here, there's nothing happening there. So if that helps paint the picture, I'll kind of let you guys kind of start chiming in here. But that's what we're trying to look at, is maybe a way to define it, so we as staff can have a tool that we can utilize, make an official determination, which the relief valve for that can also be appealed and then ends up back before the Board of Adjustment anyway.
So the
You
main,
need, excuse me? Go ahead.
the main purpose of the 30-foot setback is for safety, or is there also liability for the golf course?
And to protect view sheds from both, it's, you wouldn't want, an accessory structure setback, let's say for instance, in the regular R10 district is 10 feet. If you have a golf course setback, it's going to be 30. So you don't want to be, enjoying your afternoon on the links and then there be a pool potentially just 10 feet there off. So, there's noise associated with that. There's other there's regular just single-family residential activity that's occurring right there. But there again, too, for protection.
the visible and audible privacy for both the players and the homeowners.
Correct.
Has there been any attempt to reach out to Pinehurst, Bob Farron, to get some of his viewpoints?
There is, and we've been talking about, I actually, as of today, I sent an email as an update, kind of, instead of just, we've been having phone conversations, we've, you know, as he showed up to some of these meetings, as they've been preparing these letters that the Board of Adjustment's been seeing, we've just bounced some ideas off each other, nothing really concrete. Before we get to a point where we're drafting language, I mean, we don't even have language really drafted with this memo, kind of like what we shared with the tree preservation. I would love to lean heavily on him. He's the expert. We want to hear from experts. I'm not an expert. So I sent an email to him and let him know sort of this approach that we're trying to think of taking, and what, you know, is there a industry standard definition? Is there an industry standard dimension, maybe? Maybe it could be a simple fix as we change our dimension, or maybe we only say one golf course setback will apply if there's more than 2 or 3 abutting property lines to golf course area. So we hope to hear from him. One thing too, I'd like to say, I did exhaustive research in other municipalities within the entire nation, Florida, California, here in our state. No one has I guess no one's having the problem that we're having, at least to the point where they've not clearly defined it or set it aside in their ordinance like what we're trying to think of doing.
I would think some of this also, in many communities, I would guess, that many of the golf courses are inside communities governed by HOAs that may have some definitions. Probably makes it more difficult to look at certain communities.
And a good point about bringing up the HOAs, you know, they have a lot more power than municipalities have. So they can exercise some discretion and judgment on how and where they you know, how they apply some of their powers, as long as it's within their scope that they have within their bylaws. So we do have some of those in the village too, like Pine Wild, for example, has a little bit more stringent setback than we do as far as the rear, but they pretty well keep their 60-foot setback, which is the same that we have. However, they can grant their own variances aside from what the village can, and variance may not be the right word, but they can grant adjustments to their setback. So that still wouldn't preclude a property owner from getting a variance or meeting our development regulations. But in most cases, you're correct. It could be gated communities or those governed by HOAs where the municipality may be completely out of it.
So I can't help at all, really, and I'm sorry, with the whole definition of field of play. I read Jules' email, and I'm glad that it's important to her, and I'm glad it's important to you, because, I mean, as a board member, sometimes it's been conflicting, because if we're really trying to make strict application of the ordinance, then sometimes we're in a compromising situation, mostly because of this definition. And I think a lot of times we use some discretion, or we're in a situation where we could use some discretion where it may conflict with that strict application of the ordinance. And so, yes, if there's anything we can do, I mean, it would keep it out of the BOA process.
For me, one of the strongest points in approving something is when we have a letter from Pinehurst approving the construction, because they've looked at it and said it's not within play, and it, you know, and we have no problem with it. So I would think if we put in the ordinance that if they had approval from the HOA or Pinehurst, the ruling body that maintained the golf course, that it would, you know, we could approve it as well if it's within certain standards. But because I think they know better than we do, you know, because you've got, you know, the comfort stations and the snack bars and the golf course and carts and cart paths. And so there's too many things that come into play that could be affected by some building. And, you know, but every one of those that we approved, we had a letter from Pinehurst saying it was okay. And that weighed a lot with me as making the decision, so.
But that made the applicant still make an application, pay a fee, and all that stuff. That should not be necessary.
which should not be necessary to
In an
make.
application and the payment of a fee, the ordinance should be changed to make a specific dimension within which they could build a lot, build on the lot.
Excuse me. You couldn't say that if the proposal is approved by the governing body and it meets their specifications, that it could.
Well, how would that process be initiated?
They would have to have a letter from the governing body, either the homeowners association or Pinehurst, stating this has been reviewed and approved, and, you know, it will not affect field of play or whatever else. And then, you know, as long as it's not ridiculous.
And let me step in, because this, just real quickly, to address one of those. One of the big problems with, even though they are the experts and, you know, they are basically the golf course, is, and the problem in allowing Pinehurst LLC to weigh in is that we're allowing another property owner dictate what happens on someone's private property. So we want to stay away from that. However, we need to lean heavily on their guidance, I do feel, to your point, on how we can apply. How would they applied their determination with these letters we've seen? When you looked at this proposal that came before the Board of Adjustment, why did you say Pinehurst LLC has no objection for the use of a normal 15-foot side setback along this property line? And is it because, you know, it's not adjacent to a tee box, fairway, rough, out-of-bounds marker, or it's more than 50 feet from an out-of-bounds marker? It's an accessory or associated feature of the golf course, and therefore not part of the golf course, such as a comfort station, a cart path, a clubhouse, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, as we're talking, you know, I'm liking what I'm saying now. I haven't thought about that before. You know, it is, we need their terminology and help and guidance. So, but yeah, we need to ask, how did you arrive at your decision? Maybe that's a way we can build that into this, so that staff who are not experts in that, we can look at that, make an objective call, so that we're not, well, just because I don't hit it over here, that's no problem for me, I'll approve it, and then, well, you know, Darren's over there, well, I'll break their windows. I get to beat on him because he's not here.
Do the property lines typically coincide with the out-of-bounds lines, or like, are they one and the same? So on the other map that you had up, does that out-of-bounds line that's on the back of each of those properties continue straight, or does it hug the line of that lot?
The property line is supposed to be, well, the out-of-bounds line is supposed to be the property line,
So on
but
that,
not all the time.
on that
Doesn't
one
have it.
specifically, and lots like that where the golf course extends in, is the out-of-bounds line on the top side of that lot?
I will say that I have seen many surveys that have come in, and the surveyor for, let's say when this house was built, let's just say that, because there's obviously one there now that the white bar is not showing up across it. They will mark where the out-of-bounds markers are on the golf course, so off of the subject property. And sometimes, you know, Leo says, sometimes, you know, they're kind of generally in line with the parcel lines. Other times, they follow the layout of the fairway here. So they're kind of zigzagged a little bit. So, I mean, maybe a way is
But at
to-
that point, you're still within a certain distance from whatever that line is.
Correct. Now that could change. Again, even I'm not a golfer, but I do know that, you know, designs could change. I think we have in our area, we're lucky enough that our courses are fairly established. So there's probably not going to be any great redesign or changes to the areas. However, there could be. Out-of-bounds markers do move. I mean, golfers move them, I've heard, you know, as they're out there. I'm not gonna
There
pick-
are established standards by the PGA, USGA, as to areas of play, certain widths of fairways and setbacks off of fairways. That's a source of reference material. That's been updated quite frequently, and I don't know if all of the golf courses here, being so old, have utilized those standards. But that's a starting point, I guess we could look at and see if we can get some information from Pinehurst, whether or not it's good or bad.
Good point. That's one avenue I've not thought about kind of checking is going down and seeing. Now, we've had folks give testimony at these hearings that, typical golf course sign is to be this wide away from this and all, and that's nothing I've ever really sunk my teeth into. But again, to answer David's question, sometimes, out of bounds markers they're here, they're there, and they could change. So that could render a potential issue where you don't have like a seamless type of development. If you look down through here, you would see a line. You would think that all the houses would generally would align here. If you have them now with sometimes in line with where the out of bounds markers are, they could potentially zigzag and have something out of character. I don't think that's that wouldn't be a huge concern on my end, but something to consider.
I'm wondering, I don't think you'll be able to have wording to where you will never have another request come before the Board of Adjustment. But to look at the properties and see which ones are most likely to ask for a variance, like the corner lots that have two sides that are on the golf course setback, like the last one we had, and maybe try and gear the new ordinance to the majority of the types of property that are likely to ask for a variance, if that's possible, I don't know.
Sure, and we're not looking at trying to give a free pass to anyone now who doesn't want to have a golf course setback applied to them where, a good chunk of everyone already has. And to that point, I've referenced the Daniel earlier. Daniel's our GIS analyst that's in-house now, and he can do things with maps and our software that I could only dream of. Now, Kelly's obviously learning a lot right now, so she took a class this week, and she's starting to sink her teeth into how to prepare maps. But I actually had a meeting with him today, this week, and gave him a visual and explanation that what if he could generate some maps for me. And the main one that I asked him to do is vacant properties that have two abutting property lines on golf courses. So if we could get an idea for that, then, I think we're probably still going to be surprised that there's still going to be some out there. But it could come back. There's four of those left in the village. So then it's a moot point. But what the past 2 years have taught us is we probably need to take a very close look at it. And thankfully, we've had a little bit of time in-house to take a closer look at it. And, I've got a personal interest in it because typically you don't get many variance cases. We have, and if we were going to have one, I wouldn't mind seeing something a little bit different than a golf course setback. But again, this is part of the problem when you look at development regulations. If you're seeing a flood of variances for something, there might be something wrong with your standard. So let's take a closer look at that standard. And I know some council members have noticed that this is becoming routine. Board of Adjustment should not be meeting routinely to discuss variances to the development ordinance.
Also, as a point of fairness to applicants, one of the recent applicants made a comment to such that he wouldn't have purchased the lot if he didn't think he was going to be able to get this variance, and that he had researched previous Board of Adjustment meetings, and he didn't think it was going to be such a big deal. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And I think that has maybe eroded a little bit. This process has eroded a little bit of the effort that the applicants take to maybe take care of their own hindrances.
It's watered it down.
It's watered down. And so I think that they believe, I got to go pay my fee, I got to fill out my application, I got to sit in front of a board of people who are going to ask me the same questions they asked people before, and they're going to vote me yes. And I just, to me, that's the difficult part of this. If as a board, if we're trying to be realistic and trying to, again, do our job by upholding the ordinance.
And to that point, Sorry, this mouse doesn't work very well from far away. Well, maybe also the operator. So of all these shaded rows you see here, these variance cases, believe it or not, staff did a concerted effort to kind of buffer some of those applications to before you, because we do let applicants know, it's not just, I'm just going to go and ask for it. I mean, it's, here's the standards of review, here's the process. It's meant to be arduous. It's not meant to be, oh, just because my neighbor got one, I need to get one. But good point, Jeremy. It's diluted it. It really has the process and the intent of a variance from a development regulation.
Also, it's kept some applicants from going back possibly to their home designer and making changes that would have been fitting on the lot.
Any other comments about golf course setbacks?
Looking at the variances too, because we had one where the landscaper had built the patio over on number 3, and then he found out that it didn't meet the setback requirements. And a lot of these are like within 5 feet of the, from 25 to 30 feet. So maybe, I mean, can you put such a thing that the staff, if it's between 25 and 30 feet, if the variance, that they could make a judgment on it without having to go before the Board of Adjustment? Can you be that?
We can't make judgment calls. We could look at, accessory structures, or say patios or decks, saying that they can encroach up to a certain amount. But that hasn't been, we haven't heard many. I think there's been 2 variance requests on golf course setbacks that were for accessory structures. The rest have been for additions, principal buildings, like brand-new single-family. But I believe the Deerwood Lane was one, the exterior fire pit, that's what that one was. And then the Lake Hills, which is or Oak Hills, I'm sorry. That's the one that Cindy was referencing there.
Brick patio thing.
Substantial patio, I might add.
But he only needed 2.8 feet. I mean, it was just the corner of it.
Yeah, okay, so, good thing. Let me tell you, there is an opportunity for administrative modifications. They're not exercised greatly, but that's 10% of the setback, or 2 feet, whichever is less. And that is a statutory, that's an enabling legislation that's given to staff. We can modify, but you've got to it's got to be less than 50% of the affected building facade. You've got to be preserving a specimen tree on site. It was made in error, in good faith, on a valid building permit. Emphasis on valid, because, we understand.
Didn't have one of those, did you?
And I know Leo and Jeremy know that when you get out there in the field, the guys in the field are pretty good, but sometimes they're, oops, I'm 6 inches over here, so what do I do now?
So could you up that percentage? No.
That's statutorily allowed.
How many of these were on questionable lots with 2 sides, or how many of these were?
Okay.
you
Good
know,
point, David. Let me see if I can think. Leo, Cindy, you'll have to jump in and help me.
The Rockland
Four
one was.
Peachtree was one.
Okay.
So 67 Deerwood was not. 95 Oak Hills was not. Beasley was. So we've got 2. Firestone, that was a number 7. You guys have to help me out with that
7.
one. I can't remember that one. 80 Rockland
That was the V
Oh, so technically it did.
setback.
So technically it did. So yeah, so now we're up to 4. I counted 80 and 10 Rockland, so 5 of the 8. So over half of those. Good point. I should have thought about that, David. The Firestone, thank you for, it was like this. The rear lot was just like this. So you don't get more unique than that. Leo, do you have, or would you want to, or I don't mind doing it if we want to read, you guys have a copy of Julia's comments that she wanted to send. I don't know if you wanted to mention it out to the group or for the record, or Julia and I, too, we have had many conversations about what to do about this.
She sent email to Alex dated August 6th, 2:52 PM. Hi, Alex. So it has been 50% of our variance cases. No wonder it feels like our bread and butter. My thought is that council should explore a legislative fix to this situation by modifying the golf course setback requirement to mirror the zoning district's regular setback requirement, where the golf course property in question is not adjacent to a tee box, fairway, or green. I'm not sure if this will achieve the result we're looking for, not being a golfer myself. I would use the term field of play rather than defining those areas of the course, but the field of play definition in the historic district guidelines are actually broader than what I think we traditionally think of when we hear that term. My additional thought was that we should modify the decision of golf course in the PDO to make clear that the purposes of setbacks, we are not contemplating accessory uses owned by the resort. In other words, cart paths, buffer areas, around the course, etc. But I'm not sure whether that change will create mischief elsewhere in the PDO. I do wish I could be there to hear this discussion because you're right. I do have a strong opinion about making a change that will take these considerations out of the hands of the BOA. Please feel free to generally share that I am in favor of a legislative fix to this, rather than forcing folks to seek a variance for situations that we all quite similar to one another.
Almost like she's here.
So, more coming down the road.
So if you guys have any other ideas, I know especially, maybe not so much Sonia, but David, I get to pick on you since you're the newest. You haven't had many of these right in front of your face and seen all these. I can certainly give you copies of the record and the application for some of these here, if that can kind of wrap your head and your vision around it a little bit more. Just for you guys to kind of mull on it, think on it. Like I'm ready very soon to bring something before you guys, and we have support, so we can move fairly quickly if we think we can start finding maybe some way to really apply something for these unique instances.
Aren't all these on the website for the Board of Adjustment? Can you not see the minutes and the recorded meeting?
You can, the website here, our Novus Agenda website.
Might be helpful to listen to the meeting itself if you're.
Yeah, and
I was here for 2/3 of these. I was just looking at.
so, yeah, you can search, David, you can put in a custom date range. You'll see the dates on that table, and you can select Board of Adjustment, so you can go there. You can download the minutes, you can download the full agenda, or you can just do public hearing item by public hearing item.
Are we bound by interpreting unnecessary hardship as far as what's already been approved in the past as unnecessary hardship, or can that adjust into the future?
There's no precedent set it's basically the application that's
Because that's
before you
where
at
I
the
feel
time.
people are coming in, some of those, if it's the lot where it's 30 feet on both sides, that's a unique lot, but when it's a patio encroaching 2.8 feet into a setback, that could be a new design plan that could be fixed instead of granting that variance.
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Tanya, you got anything?
Anything else? It's not on the agenda, but can you give us a brief status report on where we are with respect to small area plans?
Oh, Leo. I believe there were some other items that kind of kept Darren from cleaning up another housekeeping items that he had to kind of get out. I believe got a firm selected, or we're negotiating with a firm to try to begin work on that. So that will be coming.
There have been responses back from the two that were contenders.
Yeah, no, I think Darren got a green light to move forward with,
Okay.
to work on negotiations with one, yes.
Any other comments from the board? We do have a situation with Julia, who has been absent for the past 2 or 3 board meetings because of her concern about people not wearing masks, not being observant of social distancing, and would request that the board consider doing Zoom meetings in the future until this COVID situation clears up. We have done that in the future, especially with the Board of Adjustment. And apparently, conditions here can be made such that for those who want to come to the meeting in person, they can, wear masks or not, sit at tables spaced out according to the 6-foot rule, and still have people, board members, participate who are at home through the Zoom process. And I think we're going to have to do that because Julia, as the Board of Adjustment Chair and a Vice Chairman of Planning and Zoning, is the ETJ representative, and her voice needs to be heard on these applications, especially for those in the ETJ. So we're probably going to be working that out in the future, and we'll most likely do that at the September 3rd meeting.
We certainly have that option, Leo, that we can exercise, especially if everyone is on board with it. And, you know, we have that technology and capability. We have the support. If we can get the support in the direction from Village Council is to move forward that way, and the board's comfortable with that, we certainly can. As of today, there's nothing on file to come before the Planning and Zoning Board for the September 3rd meeting. Obviously, we are ready to move forward with this, implementing electronic submissions, as this showed up a couple of times. We could have most likely been ready to bring it to a public hearing at this meeting, but with Darren being on vacation, he really wanted to be here for that. So there may be a potential that we might have a public hearing for the September 3rd to look at PDO changes. There's also an application in the process for another major subdivision that's kind of working through. I'll update you guys as soon as I can if we'll need to schedule a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Board for that too. But as of now, there's no known potential submissions for anything before the Board of Adjustment.
Any other comments? Thank you for that, Alex. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Jeremy, seconded by Cindy. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 5:18 PM.